Hello, we're your hosts, Sourish
and Kuan,
This is WaffleByte,
where we bring you interesting bites about technology,
business,
and things that might change the world.
You can find all our sources in the description,
and you can skip to the chapters you're most interested in.
But for now, enjoy the show. As you've been aware, Kuankuan, the E key on my keyboard has been broken for quite a few weeks now. And it got to the tipping point where I just needed to fix it. And so my solution was somehow to wedge off the slash key from the numpad, which somehow also wedged off the scissor switch mechanism, and replace the entire E key bit with that, and then swap the E key to the numpad. And for some reason, both keys and both switches now work.
What an ingenious solution, Sourish. Perhaps you should have adopted it a couple of weeks ago instead.
This is why we go to Imperial. We're engineers of the future, Kuankuan.
The thought for this episode is the future of dating apps AI? Elon Musk, who initially co-founded OpenAI with Sam Altman in 2015, recently has not been on such good terms with him. Now, OpenAI was initially founded as a non-profit. It was funded mostly by Elon Musk. They were founded with the aim to stop Google, the industry leader at the time, from reaching AGI first. But it soon became clear that it was extremely expensive and the not-for-profit route was not going to work so well. They had to take in some more money, and Elon wanted to assume control. But Sam Altman and others ultimately won the battle against Elon Musk for control and ousted him in the process, stating that he could likely be a dictator if he wanted to. Since then, Elon Musk has been opposing much of what OpenAI is doing, including asking for a 6-month pause in AI development when ChatGPT was initially released, whilst also launching his own startup, XAI. Coincidentally, XAI is looking to raise around $10 billion in its latest round of funding. Last year, Elon Musk also sued Sam Altman before retracting the lawsuit initially, then suing him again and amending the lawsuit in November last year. Now, this led us to more recent times where Elon Musk has assumed a non-governmental position in the Department of Government Efficiency, also named DOGE, and has formed incredibly close ties with the President of the United States, which is, of course, Donald Trump. However, he was reportedly blindsided by Sam Altman's Stargate announcement, which occurred shortly after the inauguration, and was in the White House with Larry Ellison of Oracle and Masayoshi Son of SoftBank. And they announced a $500 billion investment into the United States to build data centers and other infrastructure. Immediately, Elon Musk took to X and claimed that the relevant parties did not, in fact, have enough money to complete the investment, which seemed to be partially accurate in SoftBank's case because they had not secured their funding entirely. But Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella famously said that, quote, "I am good for my 80 billion."
Even though this $500 billion figure is huge, I think, firstly, there's a very good chance of it happening over the next few years combined. And secondly, I think they have already pretty much secured 100 billion of that in quite a short time frame. And so there is a huge amount of money being poured into AI, and a lot of that is indeed being redirected to these one or two companies such as OpenAI. So even though this was a super high figure, I don't think it's like an order of magnitude above where it is.
I think with the excitement around AI and the whole buzz, capital expenditure on data centers and the like has been tremendous recently, and it's only set to grow. And having said that, I think that it was almost inevitable that they would spend a lot of money anyways, and this move was sort of packaging it all together to essentially please the President of the United States, because he was obviously delighted with that huge $500 billion figure. More recently, Elon Musk, who's very irritated at OpenAI, obviously, has launched an unsolicited bid for the non-profit behind OpenAI, the for-profit branch, for $97.4 billion. Now, I found this very interesting because it highlights the complicated nature of valuing OpenAI, because the not-for-profit owns a bit of the for-profit version, and I believe the for-profit version in the last funding round was valued at $167 billion, and since then it's probably grown because of investor appetite. And so the not-for-profit owns some of the for-profit, but how much it's worth is sort of opaque.
This is a bit speculative, but I wonder if Elon now wants to essentially be the AI company or have the AI company of the future, because recently XAI has underseen a huge investment, and they are valued at quite a high amount now, and they do indeed have cutting edge models, and in fact the world's biggest GPU cluster data center, at least for now. And I wonder if Elon just really wants to nab as much of OpenAI as possible to bring his technologies to XAI and make him the dominant player in the AI space.
I think Elon has huge ambitions with regards to AI, and also I think he wants to make X the everything app, which I'm not sure is going to work. But I think that his ambition for OpenAI is probably not going to materialize because of, well, a variety of factors, but I don't see him getting control of OpenAI anytime soon. But as you said, XAI is doing quite well, and with the huge investor demand, they've now managed a fairly lofty valuation as well. Sam Altman initially had rejected this bid on X before offering to buy X itself for $9.74 billion, which is of course much less than the $44 billion Elon paid for X in 2022. A couple days later, the board of OpenAI formally rejected this bid, saying how OpenAI is, quote, not for sale. Now, what I also found interesting was that it just shows the different personalities on display, because Sam Altman also called Elon Musk, quote, not a happy person, which I think is probably has merit, because Elon Musk obviously is incredibly busy, spends all of his time being the CEO of 6 companies or something like that. I don't think he has a lot of time to spend on each company, given how busy he is. He now also increasingly spends a lot of time at the White House, and ultimately, I don't think he is happy. I think he always has something that is irritating him that he wants to change. And in a state like that, I don't see how you can be a truly happy person.
I think Elon thinks that humanity is just screwed, and that it kind of all rests on him to fix it and to pave our future. You know, whether that be solving climate change through electric vehicles or solar panels, or getting humans to Mars before the Earth blows up or something like that, or trying to make the government more efficient before the USA implodes. And I agree in the sense that Elon sees all of these existential risks in front of him, and he takes it upon himself to fix them all, which obviously is ambitious. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but I do think taking on so many risks and always seeing that, and then putting the burden on yourself, that will undoubtedly make you a very stressed person, and therefore not a very happy or content person.
I also think that what you said about Elon taking it to himself and fixing all of the problems, I think that whilst he is incredibly capable and has done a tremendous amount, for example, with Tesla, I think he himself probably overestimates his capabilities. But on the flip side, you sort of need to do that in order to truly create change. But I think that with these AI and electric vehicles and climate change, etc., I think you can make an argument that whilst Elon was at the forefront for example, electric vehicles, I think right now the amount of competition is actually quite tremendous, and it's no longer just up to him to create change for humanity in a positive direction.
All of this fighting on X and other sources of media, it really just highlights to the rest of the world that ultimately, you know, all humans are very similar. You know, they all still have the same emotions, and even the people in power, they have, of course, a different mindset, a better mindset when it comes to success than the rest of us. However, they are very fundamentally still a human and the same people we are, and we are fundamentally the same people that, you know, 5-year-olds are. And it's a good reminder that no one person is really hugely above anyone else, and that you shouldn't put your full faith into these people if you can't put full faith into yourself.
Arm, which is a company based in Cambridge in the UK, is reportedly going to join the chip wars. People familiar with the company have said that it will launch a CPU with Meta signed up as the initial customer. This will increase competition in the semiconductor space, but they are unlikely to be able to compete with Nvidia, who still holds a near monopoly for accelerator cards. SoftBank is also finalizing an acquisition of Ampere, which is a chip-making company backed by Oracle, for $6.5 billion, and this is set to be helpful for ARM's chip designing ambitions.
This is very intriguing because whilst it's quite a small step for ARM to go from designing cores to full-on CPUs, it now means that they are competing with some of their customers. And as we've learned from TSMC a few decades ago, TSMC manufactured chips and they did not compete with any of their customers. Whereas in the sense that, for example, Samsung, who also owned a fab, why would Apple go and pay Samsung billions to make a few chips when Samsung is going to turn around, use that profit to make a better Samsung Galaxy phone and therefore compete with Apple on the smartphone space? And so Apple really didn't want to go to Samsung to fabricate their chips. And that's one reason why TSMC was so successful, because they just didn't compete with anyone else. And I think that is potentially one of the reasons that ARM is also really successful, and why, for example, RISC-V still hasn't seen the huge amount of adoption that it could have seen by big tech. And this move, I think, in the short term, I'm sure it's great for ARM, but in the long term, I fear that it may be not so productive to ARM's bottom line.
I think with TSMC, I'm not sure how deliberate the decision was at the time on how much foresight it held, but it certainly was very successful. I think with ARM, as you said, the fact that now they're competing with their own customers means that either they'll do incredibly well, not only in the short term, but also longer term, because they'll be able to charge more money for their chips. Or what you alluded to is that these big tech companies who happen to be customers of ARM will look at this and say, well, it's going to cost us a huge amount of money to develop our own chips and reduce our dependence on ARM, but since they're effectively competing with us, we may as well spend this money. And if that does happen, then ARM may struggle more if they cannot offset the loss in revenue by their new chip sales. But at least in the short term, ARM's stock price has risen about 6% on the announcement, continuing its upwards trend, and its value has doubled since its IPO in 2023.
What's also great about this is that it introduces more competition. And if ultimately most of big tech does decide to now develop on other chips, such as the RISC-V platform, well, that's going to be great for the rest of us, for the consumers, because now we have more choice and we have more innovation and more competition.
I think crucially, though, we need people to be able to compete with Nvidia. And Nvidia seem to have a chokehold because of their CUDA cores, which everybody relies on. I also think that there's another issue in that the bottleneck for the amount of chips we have may not be the designers, it may well instead lie with the fabricators, and TSMC does not have a whole load of spare capacity to pump out consumer-grade chips. So I think until that gets solved, consumers will still be less important than data centers and institutional clients, and so we'll have to suffer basically in the near-term future. And I think that's quite unfortunate indeed.
Yes, we've been seeing that with GPUs. For example, the paper launch of NVIDIA's latest 5019, 5080, well, those were basically unavailable. But we know that, of course, NVIDIA clearly has the capital, they clearly have the resources and the deals with TSMC to produce more of their consumer GPUs, just that these don't generate anywhere near as much money as the enterprise ones.
Absolutely. When you can sell a latest accelerator card for tens of thousands of dollars, why would you sell it for, admittedly, a very high $2,000 to a enthusiast? Finally, recently there have been leaks for the upcoming iPhone 17 series, with a Pro version and a new Air version. This is in addition to the new iPhone SE that is set to be released on the 19th, according to Bloomberg's Mark Gurman. The new iPhone SE is likely to resemble an iPhone 14, doing away with the home button and instead having Face ID and a bigger screen. In addition, Apple has also recently announced compatibility with Android phones for Apple TV Plus. Now, Sourish, have you seen the new leaks for the iPhone 17 series?
Not yet.
I think you should go and search them up and see what your reactions to them are.
It looks remarkably like a Pixel phone.
That is precisely what I thought. But also, specifically for the Air version, they claim that the Air is set to be only 5.5 millimeters at its thinnest. But the camera bump, or rather the camera bar, is going to be quite a bit thicker than that. And I'm wondering, that's going to be interesting from a geometry standpoint. And also, what I also thought of was that people tend to put cases on their phones. And so, because the camera bar is so big, the case is going to be very thick. So they're going to nullify Apple's engineering department's probably lots of effort to make it so thin, because they're just going to put a case on top and it's no longer going to be so thin.
I mean, I agree, but at this point, like you don't sell a device by being technically better. We reached that bar a few years ago. I think most of us can agree there. And the classic philosophy or the idea that the capabilities of software will expand to fill a device's hardware, we just haven't seen that very much in the smartphone space. And so at this point, the physical product you produce is all about the marketing aspect and the value aspect, as opposed to the tech inside it. And so I think to make it really thin, Apple just decided that they really wanted to be able to market it that way. And that matters a lot more to the average consumer than the raw power.
I think your point about power is spot on, because we've seen people increase the length of their upgrade cycles. And so that's materializing with fewer sales for Apple and other smartphone manufacturers, because you simply don't need to upgrade if everything works mostly fine. To your point about the design, I think it's sort of ironic, right? Because most consumers would love to have more battery, and you fit in more battery by making your phone thicker. At the same time, I think that the 5.5 millimeters is going to work fantastically from a marketing standpoint, such that people might purchase this phone even though they would have preferred, from a practical standpoint, a thicker phone with more battery. But it looks so magnificent on advertisements, and I'm sure in Apple stores, that they might indeed sell a lot of it. I also like the fact that they're sort of streamlining their product stack in terms of Air and Pro, because I think it's at least they're using terminology which everybody is familiar with, which can't be said for some other tech companies.
In the past couple of years, we've seen Apple become much more enthusiast-friendly in terms of bringing much more control to the software and the cameras and how you arrange icons on a screen and stuff like that. And that's generally been very good, and I've really liked that shift, because maybe one day in 5 years, Apple products will become something I consider strongly, like iPhones. However, what these leaks suggest to me is that Apple aren't going to stay on that trend, because they're still thinking about releasing an iPhone SE that has a 60Hz refresh screen, or as we talked about, this really thin phone that could clearly be so much better if it was thicker. Then maybe their priorities still are fundamentally the same as they always have been, and that they want to make your decisions for you and essentially play on your emotions to get you to buy the product, as opposed to get your brain to buy the product.
I think Apple has now realized that people will buy iPhones no matter what, right? So they're not competing with Androids, they're competing with themselves, and they're trying to get people to upgrade, because I think they've realized that people will continue to buy the iPhone and stick to the iPhone brand, especially in certain markets like the US, regardless of what they offer. So they're trying to offer something that will appeal to these people looking to upgrade, and I think having a very thin iPhone happens to be something that will create headlines and possibly will convert into more sales, because I think Apple are conscious of their flat, essentially, sales of iPhones, which they're trying to change for their shareholders.
I'm very displeased, because whilst normally I wouldn't care what some other company's doing, because I can just pick a phone from another company, the problem is, what Apple does sets the status quo and becomes true in many Android phones within a few months. And we kind of seen that through the headphone jack, through other random things like the the notch and the dynamic island feature, if you can call it a feature. And I just don't like how other Android companies feel the need to copy Apple, because that has a downstream effect on me. And, as you know, Kuankuan, my current phone is the Sony Xperia 1 Mark IV. And the Sony Xperia 1 Mark VI, which was released in 2024, well, that phone has kind of been unenthusiastified, where they've kind of removed all of the big features from this phone that I really like. And that just means I'm now not going to be a customer of Sony, and there's not really any phone that I'm a particular fan of coming soon.
I just hope that we don't have a slimming contest in the smartphone space, and instead people innovate with battery technology, like some Chinese companies have been doing, and instead we have thicker phones with bigger batteries so that charging is done less frequently. I think that would be best for all consumers.
One cool use of AI, instead of creating all of these junk features that no one cares, particularly related to photos, is you could have AI analyze your operating system and your phone and figure out how to cut stuff out to make it more efficient. Like maybe this process hasn't been used for a while and isn't doing anything, so you can end it. Or maybe the AI realizes you're about to use this process and so it can start it in advance. And companies have hinted at these types of features for years, but they've never really materialized in the sense that phones don't feel much faster than they used to be. And I feel particularly after you own a phone for maybe 12 months and you don't factory reset it, then it gets noticeably slower as it kind of gets more clogged up with stuff. And that is a perfect opportunity for AI to swoop in and fix that and make your phone feel brand new and extremely fast. That would be really exciting. Hello, today is my 19th birthday, so I want to take a look back at the wonderful year I've had. Today I've scrolled through my photo album and found random moments with entertaining stories or interesting ideas. And I don't want to make this about me, but I just want to use this past year as a way to share some cool stuff with you. This will just be me talking into the camera without a script and without any editing, because I thought that's the best way to do an episode like this. And as this episode is a little unusual, I'd recommend watching it with video, but it also works just fine with audio anyway. Okay, so first off, this was my 18th birthday last year. Here is I got this matcha basket cake. Now, would I buy it again? No, but it was certainly quite nice, even though it looks a bit scraggly. That's kind of the point of the basket cakes. And on the right is, essentially, our family kind of has a tradition where basically every year for my mum's birthday, we've gone to Pizza Express. And we used to go to Frankie and Benny's for my birthday. But the Frankie and Benny's where we live shut down a few years ago and got replaced by, a Burger King, something like crazy like that. And I was really upset. So I just relegated to go to Pizza Express for my birthday every year for the past couple of years. But one thing we do, or at least I do, is when I was small, I always used to get this thing called a Bambino Chino, which is like a bit of milk, very, very foamy milk, with like some chocolate powder sprinkled on top. And I'm pretty sure that's not even on the menu anymore, but we still always order it because they always serve it anyway. And that's kind of just a tradition that we have with the Bambino Chino. Okay, next up, yes, I think this was in March, and it was a cam jam. So in Cambridge, there was this meetup for Raspberry Pi and robotics and electronics enthusiasts, and I think this was the same week as Raspberry Pi's 12th birthday. So it's been 12 years since Raspberry Pi, the company, has existed, and so they hosted this cool meetup. And so on the left is probably the coolest thing I saw, which is this guy, I think his name is Rob. He made his own 3D printer, but it's an extremely fast 3D printer. So this 3D printer, it does a benchy, and actually I have one. So this is a benchy, and if you don't know, it's like the standard way for benchmarking a 3D printer's quality, because you can kind of check for different things like the overhangs, the quality, the resolution, and all of that type of thing. And I don't know how long this took on my printer, I think maybe 1 or 2 hours. And the resolution isn't even that great. But on this printer you see in the left, it took like 2 minutes or something crazy like that, and I could literally see it print the benchy live. I don't think it was 2 minutes, I think it was more like 5 to 10. But it was crazy because I could see just print live, and I just generate this object out of thin air, moving extremely quickly. And you can even see, for example, at the bottom of the printer, these like circular black things. Those are dampeners, because the printer moves so fast it vibrates, and the vibrations will end up knocking the printer head off axis, which means it's going to be inaccurate. And so to keep it accurate, you have to dampen the vibrations so that the whole thing remains as stationary as possible. I know, I just talked to Rob about this, and there's just so much cool stuff going on in this photo. And on the right is kind of just a demonstration to kind of say happy birthday to Raspberry Pi, because they're really cool. Okay, this was also in March. I think this was Mother's Day, and this was the 10th of March. And I made some chocolate mousse with some like orange zest and cream and stuff. And I guess what we do is, as a family, is we always kind of make, at least I always make food for special occasions. So I don't really buy gifts, I don't really do anything else, I just make dishes, and I spend a lot of time and effort into some of these dishes. So this was always nice to make. Now this this is a really bad photo, but this is the only photo of this thing I have, and this says go. So in our school, towards the end of the year actually, so I only went for a few sessions, let me just mute my phone, but towards the end of the year, the school managed to get this professional Go player, who's also now a Go coach, to come in and do a session every week after school on Thursdays. And so I went to a few of them just out of curiosity, you know. I mean, when am I ever going to have the opportunity again in my life to have like a professional Go player coach me for free? So I decided to leverage it here. And it's quite cool. Like, I knew nothing about Go, but then I learned about it. And I also had a cool chat with this guy. He was really old, but he's really experienced and really kind. And he was talking about AlphaGo, I think it's called, which is Google DeepMind's AI bot that could play Go, and it made massive headlines a few years ago because it beat the best Go player in the world by quite a big shot, and the AI model did some really wacky things and still managed to win. And you know, that was just kind of groundbreaking for the world. And so I went back onto YouTube and saw that documentary released by Google DeepMind, which has like tens of millions of views. It's really popular, and that was just a whole nice experience. I like learning about Go. And I mean, the thing with like things like Go and chess is, today, in the era of computation, you know, arguably there's very little skill involved in these things, right? Like, it's all a matter of how much effort you're willing to put in terms of messing around with like chess engines, messing around with your team if you're a professional, trying to learn as many openings, learn as many different situations as possible. Like, it's all kind of just a game of memorization, which is fine, but it detracts from what the original purpose of Go and chess and all these games were thousands of years ago when they were invented in ancient India and China and all of that stuff, which is an intellectual game. It's no longer necessarily an intellectual game. But as I was completely new to Go, and I was also playing someone else who's completely new to Go, and we weren't serious about it, like we just wanted to have some fun and learn some new things. It was an intellectual game in that specific environment, and I really enjoyed kind of just learning new things and having to think through all these brand new situations I've never seen before, and trying to figure out, like, what happens if I do this or this or this? What if my piece goes there? Is he going to win? Can I make this island? Can I make the 2-eye technique thingy? So I quite enjoyed this period. I only went for a few weeks because it was towards the end of the year, but it's just really cool. Okay, this one. This was also towards the end of the year, and basically this was in like a biology society lunchtime, and I think we were just doing some sort of practical experiment, like extension experiment thing. And obviously I didn't do biology. I currently don't do biology, but again, you're in school, you have access to experts in every single field. Why wouldn't you leverage it? Especially right now. Like right now, at this point in time, it was like April, I realized that I'm about to be gone from this place, and I'm never going to be able to do stuff like this again. So I thought I'd give it a shot. And this is actually a natural photo, believe it or not. I didn't pose for this, but I was just pipetting some stuff into a test tube for some experiment. And this was just really cool. Like, I've never seen one of these pipettes in real life before, and a couple of the other equipment there. And so that was good fun. Yes, so I had this really long Easter break, and I decided to make croissants. And, you know, as I said earlier, I do quite enjoy baking and cooking stuff for my family and other occasions. And so croissants are very interesting, right? So this whole affair of baking the croissants and making them took 3 days, because I wanted to make literally the best croissants I could. This was my first ever time, and I actually haven't made croissants since then. But I spent 3 days just making them, and like a whole week beforehand, spending hours every day just researching as much about croissants as possible and learning as much as I possibly could. And so here are just a couple of photos to show my journey. And I mean, I guess the reason I took a ton of photos, and the reason was I intended to write a blog, like a really long, super technical blog about everything about croissants, and then show my journey as well. I didn't end up doing that. I absolutely do regret not doing that, but oh well, it's fine. I can do a simplified version here. So in the bottom left, you can see this is after a couple of the folds, and you can see I'm beginning to laminate my dough and my butter together to create all of those crispy, beautiful layers in the croissant. In the top left, I've already shaped my croissants, and I think I've already proofed them at this point, and so they're about to go and bake. And you can kind of see all of the extra layers here. I don't know how many I had in total. I want to say something like 30, something around there. But anyway, I baked the croissants. You can see them here with this cappuccino. And on the right, I also did a cross-section of the croissant the day after. And I mean, when you deal with croissants, right, you have to make sure they're cold. Or like, you have to make sure they're not straight out of the oven, because it is just kind of a greasy, buttery mess. They don't taste that great. They're not that crispy, and the cross-section isn't good. So you pretty much always want to wait, I would say 2 or 3 hours. And if you want a perfect cross-section, you might have to wait like a whole day before you get that. So this was my cross-section after a day. And I was actually really stoked with this. Like, obviously, if you're a professional baker, that's not great. But even if you're just like someone who's somewhat knowledgeable about croissants, you know that's actually pretty good. And so I was really happy with this, that all of this week of effort paid off. And like sourcing, like going into all the different Tesco's and supermarkets in my region to get the best ingredients, best quality butter I could, and all of that stuff. So that was fun. I mean, baking is kind of like a science, right? Like, it is a science. That's why you have to be so precise when baking. Whereas when you're cooking and doing other stuff like that, you can kind of just like season to taste, you can observe, you can use your senses. With baking, it's a lot more scientific. And that's perhaps one reason why I enjoy baking more than generally cooking. Okay, this. Yes, actually, I should probably censor some of the stuff in that left image, so I will do that in editing. But I passed my driving test. And I would guess the reason I included this picture is because I took longer than I'd like to admit for learning how to drive. Like, I spent a few extra months and a few extra lessons than I would have liked. I passed first time in both my theory and my practical, but I took longer to get to that stage. And I think if I had to say to you, like anyone here who hasn't yet driven, like how can you pass faster or do things learn faster? I think one important thing is literally just ask to observe your driver or your instructor drive. Like maybe after the first 5 or 10 lessons, maybe after 6 lessons or something like that, just like spend literally just 20 minutes just watching your instructor drive, because you can learn a lot about them, because they're probably very experienced at driving, and they will obviously have to adhere to the rules like and law perfectly because they're an instructor, but they will like push it to its limits, and so they'll be extremely efficient and extremely good at driving. And so just observe what they do and try to copy it. And that's something that I think if I did, then I would have saved, at least 3 or 4 lessons worth of time, because there was this gap where I just wasn't making much progress. And I think that's one of the reasons for it. Also, I think, when it comes to driving, at least for me, I only had 2-hour sessions, and I think most people only do have like 1 or 2 hour sessions. And you only have them maybe once or twice, or sometimes 3 times a week, usually once or twice. And to really make the most of that, you want to ensure that you kind of almost revise before the lesson as well. And so like before each lesson, I'd probably spend maybe half an hour just watching YouTube videos of other driving instructors. And that's something I didn't originally do, and I think that's another thing that really slowed my progress. Whereas if I just watched these videos and learned from experts faster, I think I would have learned faster. So I guess that's just my 2 cents on how to pass your driving test sooner. Now on the right, some more croissants, the same day actually. I actually just had some leftover dough from when I made the croissants earlier, these ones. And so I just baked some pain au chocolat later on. And these were actually really nice. I really like pain au chocolat more than croissants. I think croissants are ultimately a bit basic, and I don't know what I was expecting when I baked these, but I thought there'd be some sort of crazy cool thing that I'd be addicted to. But at the end of the day, they're still croissants. They're still a bit boring in my opinion. And so that's why I really like pain au chocolat. These were really nice. But anyway, this is interesting. So basically, I took the train to school every day for 1 hour or 50 minutes each way. And, in great British fashion, the trains were delayed and cancelled quite often. But to reclaim some of your money through delay or pay takes a bit of time and a bit of effort. And most of the time I didn't bother doing it unless it was like a full-on cancellation, in which case I get a lot of money. And so over the course of like 7 years I went to that school, I must have lost like up to maybe £800 just by being too lazy to bother delay or paying, maybe even more than £800. And so at some point, and unfortunately I only had this idea like literally in the last couple of weeks of school, so I didn't make much money in the end. But I created this script that would tap into the National Rail API and take a look at all the train timings of each day and figure out, using all of the algorithms and blah, 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 what the most efficient train timings are for me to claim to get the most money back. So what you see here is a list for a season ticket, which is half a term for me, of all of the train timings that I should claim delay or pay for and for how long. And you can see in the bottom, in total, I would make 48% of my ticket back through these delay or pay. Now, obviously, this is breaking the T's and C's if you do claim all of these, because you should only claim the trains you actually intended to take and not just every single train. But this was a very interesting project, and I kind of have to dive deep into a couple data sources. And I mean, because trains is kind of national infrastructure, everything is open. Like, if you dig deep enough, you will find all of the documents and PDFs of how everything is calculated, how everything is done. You'll have access to all the APIs, which are very slow, and all of that cool stuff. And so that was a very interesting project and really satisfying. And actually, most of my discounts were bigger than 48%. This was just the only image that I had of this code working. But this was a really cool project, and it kind of shows how if you kind of have a right idea early enough, you can kind of benefit a lot. Which unfortunately I didn't do, but it's just interesting lesson. Now this I'm going to speed on very quickly, but essentially there was some sort of like lip sync charity for fun show that our school did, and my goal I guess was kind of, I had a very specific target, and so I kind of designed this to, like I designed my own performance from scratch for 5 minutes to kind of achieve the specific target. And I'm not going to dive deep into this for reasons, because it'll be a bit embarrassing, but it's a very interesting way. If you kind of just figure out what your target is, you can almost like reverse engineer and like, well, not reverse engineer, but engineer specifically what you want to achieve your target. And this was kind of a great example for me because I end up, I guess, succeeding in my targets very well in this specific show. And yeah, I think it's just very interesting how much you can do if you really think about what you're doing and how you're creating something. Anyway, mangoes. Yes, mango season. I love mango season. That's pretty much all this slide is for. Now this slide, I went to a conference, and on the left, essentially, I stayed in my brother's place in London for the conference because it was in London, and I came there like a couple days beforehand because I was involved in setting up the conference because I was volunteering. And he basically like lampooned me for not having business cards or like any way of like contacting people easily or sharing my contact. And so what I did is that night to like midnight, I was creating these business cards, this design, which in the end I was actually pretty pleased with. There are a couple of issues which you may be able to see in the photo, but overall I was pretty happy. And I had to find somewhere in London that was not like super far away from where I was. I mean, still an hour away, but somewhere that was like open 24 hours or somewhere that would have a really quick turnaround time, which I did. So I ended up paying £50 for some business cards, and I got like a fair amount actually. I got more than I paid for, which was nice. Except that in the conference they weren't even that useful. I only gave out like 5. I don't know if that was my fault of not giving out enough, or whether they're just like not actually that useful in like the tech space. Because I imagine they're less useful in the tech space. I don't think people care about business cards as much in the tech space. So yeah, I guess that was a very interesting experience. Just rapidly designing these, getting them, and then realizing it's all kind of just a waste of time, money, and effort. But anyway, on the right, it's me playing in the arcade. So they had these custom 5 arcade machines there, and just a leaderboard of your standings. I didn't end up winning in the end, but I was extremely close to winning. And at this point, I think this was after day 1 or day 2, and I was at the top of the leaderboard at this point. And again, I include this slide because these arcade games, so they were custom made, or at least they like these are arcade machines. They weren't like official old school machines, right? They were custom made machines. But like the games on there, like Space Invaders, Juka, all of those things, they were not like official versions. They were versions that people had made online using Python. And that of course means that there are going to be random slight differences, random slight glitches or techniques or things that are slightly different. And if you figure out what those are, you can really leverage them and exploit them and just like make a ton of points. And you can really nail down your technique. So this was another one of those experiences where if you kind of just like figure out what's going on and attack the right areas, you can just like achieve a way higher outcome than what you actually should achieve. So this is kind of me being really happy. Not that I'm at the top of the leaderboard or that I'm a professional gamer, because I've literally never played arcade games before, but because I kind of found those exploits and I managed to use them. I found those vulnerabilities and I managed to exploit them to do well. And that's why I'm happy in that photo. Anyway, Blank Street, yes. So firstly, this is like, if you don't know, this is like a chain that's really popular in London. It's like there's always a huge queue outside of these shops, and they generally serve matcha drinks, but also some other drinks and pastries and things like that. And it's slightly more expensive than what I would consider market rate in London. Obviously, London, everything's expensive, but see, in my opinion, these drinks aren't like that much better, right? They are like standard. Like if I ordered a matcha drink from anywhere in London, this is what I better be getting this, right? Or I'm going to be annoyed. So this is like standard, right? There's nothing special or nothing bad about it. And yet they're so popular. And the reason is, I think they've just really nailed the idea of like social media marketing, Instagram, TikTok marketing, all of that stuff. And they've created this like brand image and this emotionless identity that people and consumers want to attach themselves to. And that's why blank street is so popular. Like people, if you are walking around London with a blank street cup, like I guarantee you people will take a double look at you or stare extra long at your cup or even ask you about it. Like I'm 100% positive that will happen to you if you walk around London with that cup. And that's kind of the addition and like admiration people have for blank street, which I find very intriguing. Like I don't know whether I like it or not, because I have to respect, like you just have to respect what they've done. Like they're a relatively new chain and they've just exploited the internet and made the most out of it to like market correctly to our generation and therefore become extremely successful. But equally, they're not actually doing anything significantly better than anyone else. I just find it interesting. I mean, I'm kind of neutral to blank street. Like it's good, it's just overrated, but it's interesting. Now this, in London also. Now this was after my A-levels. I went to London again to meet some family, and I went to, I think, Au Pain de Pepe. It's a croissant shop very close to King's Cross Station, and I think they won like best croissant in London of the year a couple of years ago. And so this was like a really great croissant. And basically, ever since I made my own croissants from earlier, I wanted to come to this shop and kind of have a cross section and compare my honeycomb and compare the exterior and all of that stuff. And I actually have some notes written down about why this croissant is better than mine. Obviously, I think now if you look at this honeycomb, it's clearly better than mine. It's more even, it's like silky and more buttery. But also the thing you can't see is that the crust is also crustier. Like it's a harder crust, it's a more crunchy crust. And so that contrast between the inside and the outside of this croissant is way better than that of my croissant, which is very interesting to look at and analyze. Now this was, I went to Lisbon in Portugal for a holiday with some friends, and this was like, these 3 images are from this thing like the earthquake experience. So I don't know, hundreds of years ago, Lisbon had this really major earthquake that like changed a lot of things. And it was very significant in the city's history. And so there was this like experience tourist attraction about the earthquake. And it was fairly expensive. Like, I mean, it wasn't expensive. It's just that as students, obviously anything more than like £5 is expensive. So this was like a serious consideration, and I decided to buy this experience. Now, what do I feel about it? I don't actually know, to be honest. Would I do it again? Like, would I recommend other people do it? No. It was quite interesting, especially like in the bottom image, there was this whole area of like physics principles behind earthquakes and other stuff. And they had all these really cool interactive demonstrations. And I love that bit. Like, that bit was almost worth the entire thing for me. Because I learned about some of this physics in school and outside school, and to kind of see it applied in action with cool interactive demos, that was epic. And so I really enjoyed that bit. But overall, I don't know, I find experiences very interesting. Like this idea of selling an experience in like a city to tourists, it's very hit or miss. And you can never truly describe what it is to someone else. Like the marketing is always very fluffy. And actually this summer I'm going to be doing some work for a couple of weeks at this escape room. But it's like a whole escape house room thingy. And so they call it an experience as opposed to an escape room. And like I was really confused as to what this was until I actually went there. And I think that one looked really cool. But it's one of those things where you just can't describe it. And like no one else can describe it to you. And so you just kind of go in blind hoping it's good. I don't know, it's just a very interesting concept, this whole idea of creating this experience in the entertainment industry. Yeah, I don't know. It's just interesting to think about. Now this, I went exploring in the earlier hours of the morning, so this was at sunrise. And I saw this, I was walking along the coast. I feel like it was probably, yeah, I think this was the coast. And I was walking along it, and I saw this abandoned building structure thing. And it's clearly been there for a while, just abandoned. And so I decided to climb over the fence to get it, take some cool photos. And so here are a couple. And it's just very interesting to explore, right? It was obviously a bit risky. I like that element of risk. Kind of explore this brand new area. And, you know, there's this whole genre online on YouTube of people exploring random dilapidated buildings or abandoned villages and all of that stuff. And it's quite cool to see those videos, but it's even cooler to do it in real life. Like, I understand why those people do it now, because it's just really cool. And it's also quite interesting to figure out, like, what was there before? So this photo in the bottom, this was like the only thing that was really standing. It was like the cubicles of the toilets. obviously you wouldn't want to use those toilets, but it was quite interesting. And on the right, you can see this was like hanging from the ceiling on the second floor in the background here. And, you know, to me it looks like a speaker, right? I think you can kind of see the frame of the speaker, you can kind of see the driver of the speaker here. And so this must have been some sort of music area, probably some bar or something like that, like a pub. And yeah, that was pretty cool to kind of look at and explore. Also kind of a waste of space. I mean, I guess you could kind of call it like a tourist attraction in itself, because I certainly enjoyed it. But yeah, it was interesting. Now more about Lisbon. I'm not going to spend too long on this, but I think it's a very interesting city. Like, I wouldn't say it's walkable. Like, there are loads of different areas, but you can't really walk between the areas. Walking within the area is really good, but walking between the areas is really difficult. But I think you can achieve quite a lot by being on a scooter. Now, the scooter prices do rack up quite a lot, the electric scooters. And so at that point, I would say you might just want a taxi, because they're not even that expensive in Lisbon. But my point was that there are loads of random like mixtures of architectures and characters and styles in the city. And I would recommend going to Lisbon just to kind of, not with any itinerary really, just to kind of roam around the whole area, kind of see things. If you see a shop you like, just go in and buy something cool. And you can see in the bottom, this was like the more modern part of the city. And then you can see like on the left, this was like, I don't even know what the part of the city this was. This was near the old part. The center one at the top is the old part. And the bottom right is also the old part. And so it's kind of cool just seeing the contrast of all of these different things in Lisbon, and it's just a city with lots of character. And also some really cool engineering. So I believe this bridge at the top, these are both photos of Europe's longest bridge, I believe. And I think the world's like maybe second longest bridge, I don't know. Actually, no, I think it's Europe's second longest bridge, because I think somewhere like Russia technically has a longer bridge, or I don't know. Either way, it's a super long bridge, and it was just really cool. As like an engineering fan and a civil engineering fan, it's just so sick to see. And also on the bottom, there's another really cool suspension bridge. Like, these are just so cool, right? You have the suspension bridge at the bottom, and I forgot what this bridge is called at the top. But this is a really common bridge these days, because it's really efficient to build, it's really cost effective, and it's like really safe, and it's just a really good bridge. So see this really long bridge was really a highlight of the trip. Yeah, Lisbon is a city of character. You kind of see graffiti, art, random things literally everywhere. And this thing in the left, this was like slap bang in like the financial district of the city. So you know, even like the more serious sooty skyscraper glass building parts of the city have this character, and I just really enjoyed it. Like, Lisbon full on like go into this character, and I really like it. So, you know, I had a great time there. Okay, then I also went to some like science outreach fair thingy in London, run by, I don't know, some Royal College of Science probably. And here are a couple of photos I quite liked. So the left one is an ice core, and so right there from that perspective, as the ice core melts, I'm breathing in air that's tens of thousands of years old, which was just a cool thing to experience. In the bottom, I believe you had two types of sugar, but it was like, I believe, don't quote me on this, but it was something like sucrose and fructose or whatever, and like they are essentially the same molecule, but it's non-chiral. And what that means is that you can't, like, they have a mirror image of each other, and so they look the same on paper, but in reality, one's a mirror image of the other, and there's no way to make like one of them like be the same as the other one. You can't orient it or rotate it in a way, and so they are technically two different molecules, even though they are almost identical. Like, they have the same atoms, they have the same bonds and all of that stuff. And so on the left and on the right, you have opposite chirality. You have opposite chirality, and you can kind of see the effect that has when, if you put light into it, it bends light in a different way. So on the left, you kind of see light bending like diagonally down this way, and on the right, you can kind of see light bending down the opposite way, the opposite diagonal, and that's really cool. And this is sugar water. And finally, this is an atomic force microscope, and this was so cool. It basically has a material sample, and you have this pointer, and essentially pokes the material sample across this entire like sample, and it measures the force that the very tip of your like pokey thing had, and then it creates this like surface level 3D map of your sample. And you know, these three images, I think in itself, if you don't care about them, like, you probably just wasted the last 3 minutes listening to me. But the reason I really like them is because I spend a lot of time on the internet learning about these different things, like ice cores. I've seen them all over the internet. Atomic force microscopes. I've seen them all over the internet. I've really wanted an AFM. I really want to build an AFM one day. And the thing on the bottom, you learn about that in school. You also see about it on the internet. And to finally see all of this in real life, to see all of this tied up together, to talk to people who actually work on this stuff and engage with them, it's just so cool. Like, this was literally a highlight of the year. It was really cool. So yeah, I enjoyed that. Now, one thing is I also went to Silverstone. This was really cool. Now, there's a very specific reason that I mentioned this slide, which is, if I go to my next slide, I also went to the Formula E race in London. And hot take, but I think the Formula E race is a better experience than the Formula 1 race. And I think the car sounds better. And it's hard to explain this without having experienced it. But in Formula 1, it's just, firstly, it's extremely loud. And secondly, at the end of the day, like, you've effectively all heard a Formula 1 car. Like, if you ever heard like a motorbike or just a fancy car on the road outside your window revving and going fast, like, that is basically a Formula 1 car. Yes, a Formula 1 car absolutely sounds better, and you can absolutely differentiate between it, and it's also a lot louder. But at the end of the day, it's not like a new experience. It's like the next level up. And of course, if you're super into Formula 1, you're super into engineering, I'm sure this is cool. But I think, unless you're like a super fan, which not even that many people are like that level of super fan, then I feel like Formula E is better because you have this really cool, like, whoosh, like electric whoosh. Like, it's just like a brand new experience, right? This is a newer experience than this is to pretty much everyone. And that's why I think the Formula E races are cooler, in terms of the sound at least. And yeah, I mean, hot take, most of you will disagree with me if you care about Formula 1, so I don't know, go find us on Twitter and go fight us on Twitter. X. But I'm probably not going to move because, no, I've been to both within like a week of each other, and I can confidently say Formula E is a better experience than Formula 1. Anyway, this was in summer. I was redesigning my website. I had this really cool idea of redoing my website on Framer. I never ended up doing that. It was going to be like a 3D based design first website. It's going to be so cool. I had the concept fully planned out in my head. I have it all written down on that OneNote sheet, just sketching ideas. I never ended up doing it, but I learned a lot of the skills anyway. And one day I do want to eventually do this. I want to make a website that's like designed first. Because currently my website is kind of designed first, but I did it mainly as an exercise in programming. So I coded my current website, but I now want to kind of focus on the design aspect and make it as cool as possible. Now, this was designing the WaffleByte logo. Everyone will have different thoughts on the WaffleByte logo. Honestly, it's not that great, but I think it's good enough, and it's good enough to last basically forever, I think. It's quite cool. But anyway, I was home alone this night, so I went out and decided to buy a waffle whilst designing the WaffleByte logo. I just thought that was a cool photo. Now this, basically, in 2023, I think it was, I participated in a study at Cambridge University where it was all about memory, and they're trying to understand how memory works. And so they put me in an MRI scanner. They were meant to put me in it for 45 minutes, but I kept falling asleep. So it ended up being like 1.5 hours in this MRI scanner doing memory tests and stuff. And they eventually gave me my data back, just because they have to, because it's GDPR and stuff. So they gave me my data back, and this was the cool opportunity for me to kind of analyze the DICOM files of my brain and kind of go through all of the layers and kind of visualize it in 3D and all that cool stuff. They're actually really kind because they initially just sent over a couple of photos, which they do to everyone by default. They just send over a few photos of your brain. But I asked for like the original full file, and they were kind enough to provide that literally within minutes of me asking. I guess legally they have to, but there was no friction to it, and it was really good. So I'm grateful for that bit. And I really love this photo of my brain. Like, I think it's cool to just see inside you because, like, you will literally never be able to do this in your life. Like, you will be dead before this is possible. So to be able to kind of get a scan of your own body or your own brain and kind of visualize it and play around with it, I think is really cool. This was upgrading my PC. I guess not much to say here. Just that if you ever want to upgrade your PC to this specific case, it's the ITX Spud Meshalicious case. Or any other Spud case, I don't know, I guess reach out to us on Twitter, because I have a few comments I want to make about this. A few really specific things that I want to say that might help you if you want to build in this case. But I'm a huge fan of this PC and this case. Yeah, it's now a super powerful, super quiet PC. Whereas before it was still like overpowered realistically, but it was not quiet because of the case arrangement and all of that stuff. So I really like the PC now. This, I went to London again, and I went to the Design Museum, and this was because I just finished reading the book called The Design of Everyday Things by Don Norman, and I got really into design at this point, and like design of not just websites but general things. So I went to the Design Museum, and these are all photos, I believe, from the same exhibition. I forgot the guy's name. I feel really bad now. Enzo, yes, from Enzo Mari's exhibition. It was in commemoration of him, and these are just a couple of cool photos I took. And you know, on the top left, you kind of see two chairs. They look like, why on earth would I take a photo of that? If you read the story of things, like, you can make anything interesting by having a good story about it. Like, it doesn't even have to be true, right? It just has to sound true. And so, literally everything in this art gallery was interesting because they all had good stories written next to them. And obviously, like, if you are a full-time designer, chances are you do actually care about your work and you do actually like focus on doing some cool new things. And so, you know, I think there were some specific things about these two chairs that made them actually interesting. But, you know, even if what he said was false, I have no clue verifying that. At least from my perspective, this is cool. So very interesting, right? Just this idea of art, design, and stories. On the bottom, so he had this like dock painting poster thing, and so you can kind of see remnants of it in the top left of this photo. But I actually didn't take a photo of the actual piece itself, because underneath the piece there were these two frames that showed Enzo's process of designing this duck beak thing. And I just found that way more interesting than the end result itself. And I guess this comes back to the idea of, like, the story is the better bit. Like, no one cares about the end result, it's the story that's cooler, especially in art and design. And so that's why I just instinctively just didn't even care about the actual thing, I just cared about the process. But it's cool to see, like, to like decompose, or I don't know if that's the right word, but like pick apart someone's mind and kind of figure out how this really talented designer got to the final piece and figure out the process. Like, look at all these beaks they were drawing and all the different variations. Like, why is that one colored? Why is that one not colored? I swear these two beaks are very similar. Like, what's the difference? And on the right, like, these different variations of the eye. Why is like the color slightly different? Why is the ratio of the outer and inner circles different? It's just all really cool to look at. And I'll definitely be going back to the Design Museum quite often, actually. Especially now that I live near it. This, I don't really know why I bought this. It's really useless. Let me get it. Yeah, I bought the Rabbit R1. It's some AI device if you don't know about it. We've actually mentioned it a few times on the podcast. But it cost me like, so it retails for £200. I managed to haggle it with some shady Facebook seller to get it down to like £70. And it was very sketchy because it came logged into someone else's account and I didn't have the pin to be able to reset it. So I had to figure out how to essentially hack this to forcefully reset it, which I eventually did. It's just cool to kind of explore this product. It kind of represents a whole shift in the industry. And I guess one of the big reasons I bought this is because, firstly, I really like orange, if you can tell by now. But also, I kind of just put this on my shelf as like some sort of, I don't know, some sort of, the same way you buy painting to put in your wall, or you buy like a photo to put on your wall, or you buy some cool vase to put on your shelf. I kind of buy weird, cool tech items to put on my shelf. So that's the best description I could give as to why I bought this. Let's see how long this video is so far. 37 minutes, that's very long. Oh well. Anyway, this is one day I was just kind of at university. So at this point I'm at university, and I was at University Imperial for some time at this point, like overnight or late in the evening for whatever reason. So I decided to just kind of roam around all the buildings and explore things, and I found this really cool product table thing in the chemistry building. And I guess the story is, like, the learning lesson from here is just explore stuff. Like, it's just fun to kind of go around and exploring things, kind of like without any really real motive. Just have time dedicated to exploring stuff. And I'm sure I do that. Like, I'm generally very busy. Like, there's always stuff to do. There's always stuff I've promised other people that I need to do, stuff for the podcast, stuff for work, whatever. But I will always kind of make the time every now and then to say, screw all of that. I'm gonna have a few hours just to do whatever I want. Like, whether it be the Design Museum, exploring Imperial at night, exploring other places at night. You know, just a bit of that every now and then I think is valuable. And it really keeps you excited in life, just in general. This fantastic reason for living in London is that, again, you have access to opportunities like these. And this is really cool. You might have seen some videos about this online, especially if you're into tech. I think MKBHD made a video, Cleo Abram also made a video. And it was this really big digital screen that now Hollywood and other studios are using to film like TV content and shows and other stuff, movies. And essentially you build this scene in 3D and you put it on your backdrop and you have this camera. And as the camera moves around, the screen in the background moves around to match the parallax. Because if you can imagine, if you just had a static image behind you, you can tell it's static. But with this setup, you just can't tell because the background is live. It's like you're in a live 3D environment that you've built on a computer, which is rendering on like some whole massive server rack with like 10 GPUs in it. And as the camera moves perspective, the background moves perspective, and so it's super realistic. And it's just so cool to see this in real life. You can see here on the walls and the ceiling, you have these LED strips, and that is also from the environment, the 3D environment, and that's to essentially ensure that all the right reflections are done. Because if there's meant to be some sort of red light above you, well, now there is. You will get the reflection in your glasses and your clothes, whatever. That's really cool. And I guess so. Two benefits of this. Firstly, it's a lot cheaper and just easier, so it's more accessible. Like this studio, I believe is actually, I think it's Lambda, and it's basically like more of a art university than it is like a real studio. But obviously they do projects with their students and they do some real world projects. But mainly they are an education institution, and so they would never have access to like cool venues to actually film in. But with this, they bought this small screen, and now they can do some really sick stuff with it. And that was cool to see. I came home for my mum's birthday to make some stuff. Again, back to this idea of making food. I really like kind of this process of learning everything you can about this item of food, figuring out how you can optimize it and make it work and ensure it works scientifically. Now, admittedly, these 3 items, well, actually, I've made pretty much all of these 4 items several times before. I had to make it low risk because it was like my mum's birthday, so I couldn't mess up. But I guess a couple of interesting points. There's the croquembouche in the bottom. I kind of messed that one up because I tried to make like a whole kilogram of caramel at once in like a consumer-sized pot and a consumer-sized hob, and that overflowed. It burned my mouth. It wasn't very good. So that was a good lesson. Never make that much stuff at once when you're making caramel. Anyway, in the bottom left, that was also interesting. So I experimented with like presentation a lot in the bottom left in particular. So it was really difficult to get these panna cottas to be perfectly shaped. But I essentially bought some ice cube trays, and I had to freeze the panna cotta so it was a solid block by the time I took it out of the ice cube tray. Then I had to thaw it in the fridge so that it was actually panna cotta consistency. That was interesting. Those flowers, those actually edible flowers, they were very expensive, and I bought way too many of them. But they were cool. Like, they were really cool. I think I would like to use them more often. I think they're just really cool, and they really elevate the whole experience. And that red thing, I called it red coral. But it was actually like some tweak. It was literally just water, flour, and sugar fried. But it looks really cool and really fancy. And especially if you dye it with a bright food coloring like red, then you kind of just elevate the whole dish. Something like that. Like, obviously, I just served it right there on a tray. I took a photo while it was on the tray. I didn't serve it on a tray. But if you got something like that at a restaurant, like, you'd think it's really cool, really fancy. And if you kind of just learn these techniques and learn some of the things they do and the things they use, you can do this yourself. And I just think to understand how all of this stuff works, to understand more stuff about the world and what people do, why things are valued more, it just makes your life more interesting and richer. And I guess that's kind of what I hope to achieve with this video. That's why it's so long at this point. I'm hoping you kind of just learn random things, random cool things you otherwise may never have come across, just because everyone has different interests and different curiosities. And so I'm sharing mine with you. Awesome. This was, back to the brain photo from earlier. I 3D printed my brain just because, I love 3D printers and I love brains, like my brain. So I thought it was just really cool to be able to 3D print a brain. So that big one is made out of plastic, and I made 2 smaller ones with an SLA printer. Again, a great opportunity to learn about SLA printers. These are liquid printers. They're like, take some liquid and I think fire lasers, UV lighted laser UV light and the liquid to solidify it. So I made this really squishy brain. Made a couple of these. This was a really fun experience. It's just really cool, right? Like, I'm holding my brain. Isn't that crazy? Like, I don't know what else to say. Like, I don't know how you can not be excited by this if this was your own brain. So, next time you get an MRI scan, which I guess hopefully you don't actually ever need to have an MRI scan because that would mean bad things. But I don't know, go find studies where researchers want to scan participants. Like, the only reason I did that study, or the main reason I did that study, was to get a brain scan. Like, they did pay me, but they paid me a tiny amount, and I also missed a fun day of school. Like, it was mainly badminton that day. And I missed that. But it was mainly to get this brain scan, which is just such a cool opportunity and such a cool thing to do. This photo is not descriptive, but I took it because I was on like this treasure hunt thing around London. Basically, if you haven't heard of this type of thing, it's like this few-hour hunt where around the city of London, where you kind of have to go to different locations. You're texted different clues. You have to phone like there's robots, there's bots, and say things and whatever. Solve different puzzles around the city. And this particular experience was fun because I did it with friends and a couple of new people who I made friends with. But I wouldn't do it again. Nothing necessarily bad about it. I think if you maybe have smaller kids, that might be a fun family activity. But I don't know. It was an interesting experience, but it got a bit monotonous. It wasn't that exciting. Like, I'd much rather just spend an hour of my time at an escape room than spending 4 hours kind of running around the city, especially because it got quite long. So you definitely need a break. Like, you definitely want to take a break to eat lunch or whatever halfway through. But also, it got a bit monotonous. And some of the, like, everyone interprets these types of things slightly differently, and you can get very little help in this case. And in an escape room, for example, if you ask for a hint, there is someone on TV seeing what you're doing and sometimes listening to what you're saying, as they can give you a very specific hint, and they are the game masters. They craft the hint perfectly for you. In something like this, you don't have that, and so your hints are kind of like less supportive. Yeah. This I bought. It's a really scrappy photo, but I bought the Meta Ray-Bans, and I think they're really cool. I guess the whole idea of taking videos, just in general in your life, is you want to save and capture memory. And the whole goal of technology, in this case, is you want to minimize the friction between experiencing a moment and capturing the moment. Like, in an ideal world, you don't even think about capturing, it's just captured automatically for you, and you can relive the experience later on. Like, that was the whole selling point of the Apple Vision Pro headset. And it's kind of, and that's not actually the selling point of these glasses. But I think it should be. I think that's the one biggest thing. Like, I've only captured a few memories with these glasses so far, and I've had them for a few months. Like, it's been incredible. Like, it's one of those things that you just have to experience it. Like, you just have to try these out. You just have to kind of try these out, go and experience and capture it with these glasses, and realize how much better everything is. Like, you have this first-person view. You don't have to think about it that much. You don't have to whip out your phone. Your hands are still free. You can do whatever you want, and it is mind-blowing how good these glasses are. For that type of thing. And so I'm really excited to see, like, as we see tech evolve. Obviously, I'm excited to have like screens on my face. Most people aren't. But I think this glass in particular, like these pair of glasses in particular, this is the sweet spot in the sense that it's come extremely close to having no friction at all between the ideal of thinking of something and capturing it. And this does a fantastic job, and you relive the memory really well because it's first person view. Anyway, you know, I would say, like, surely consider buying these glasses. They are expensive, but like, how much do you value your experiences, your life? Like, what's the point of living if you don't remember stuff? And obviously, like, you can remember stuff without having these glasses. Like, I'm not saying you need these glasses to remember stuff, but I think it takes up a whole extra level. So if you are in a position where you can buy these, like, I would genuinely recommend buying them. If you think you have a life right now that you're experiencing stuff and you're doing cool things and you want to save them in memory, remember them, and you can afford these glasses, 100%. Like, they are one of the biggest things you can really purchase, in my opinion. I also leveled up my security, so I've always been interested in technology, cybersecurity, and hacking. But I actually had pretty much the same password for everything up until a few months ago, where I switched to Password Manager, and I also ramped up my security a lot, actually. So I have very tight security now, and I also have some hardware keys. So if you want to log in, like, if you want to hack me, like, one of the few things you have to do is you have to get one of these 4 physical keys and plug that into your computer to log into any of my accounts. And obviously I'm going to know when a key goes missing. So, like, if a key goes missing, I just deactivate it, which means you can't log into my account. So that was that. It's really nice. It's actually really nice just to have this peace of mind. Peace of mind that I have a very secure digital life now. And it's not even that much effort. It's a bit of effort, right? But you can make systems in place. You can really spend hours and hours researching and thinking about your threat model and your internet life, and making sure it's striking the perfect balance between safety and effort level and convenience. And I think I've done that quite well, and it's really satisfying. So again, this is one of those things where, especially if you're young and you have your whole life ahead of you, I'd recommend investing in digital security. I mean, you don't have to like buy these security keys. I realized later on that they're not that useful. Like, I would not recommend someone else buy them. But I'm happy I did. And it's just worth thinking about, you know. Like, everything is digital these days. Like, you can get into a huge mess if you're hacked. And you just want to avoid that. It's insurance, right? It's insurance. But it's cheap insurance. And it's like not scummy. Like, it's insurance that's actually worth it. That's what I think of these things as. And I think more people should have them. Anyway, getting towards the end here. How long is this video now? 50 minutes. I'll try to keep under an hour. So I got a 3D printer. I got this in an auction from a society in Imperial for £26. So I was really happy with that. It's the Ender 2 Pro. And I have 3D printed stuff since like year 7. So like, what's that? 8 years now. I designed in 3D printed stuff. And I haven't done it that much, but I've done it a fair amount, and I've seen 3D printers work. But it's different when you can sit there in front of your 3D printer, do everything from scratch, like level your print bed, set your 3D printer up, buy your filament, all of that, and literally see in front of your eyes for 2 or 3 hours something being built out of thin air. Like, that is crazy. And it's one of those things that you don't care right now. I know you don't care, but you need to just experience this. But once you've experienced this, like, it is a mind-blowing unlock in life. Like, anything is possible. You can just, like, this is crazy. Like, how do we have this? You just need to experience it. It's one of those things you just need to experience, and it's just like a mind-blowing experience. To 3D print something yourself and see it, like, literally sit there with my laptop, just doing some work, every 5 seconds, glancing over to the printer, seeing what's happening and seeing what the progress is. That was really cool. Yeah, kind of unlocks a whole possibility in your mind about anything's possible, how far humanity and technology and science has come, and how crazy good these things are. Yeah, and on the right there are just a couple of things I printed. Another brain, of course. And this thing over here is called Pythagoras' cup. There you go. Called a Pythagoras cup, and essentially the idea is, I'm not going to tell the full story now because it's going to take a couple of minutes. But essentially, Pythagoras, when he hosted parties with the students, he didn't want them drinking too much wine and getting drunk because that's bad and irresponsible, blah blah blah. So he designed this cup where if you put some wine in it, it's fine, you can drink out of it. If you fill it up too much with wine and water, well, wine in this case, then due to some physics effect called a siphon effect, the whole cup will empty. So if you fill it up to like 80% full, the entire thing will disappear. Whereas if you fill it up to like 60% full, you can drink everything perfectly fine. And he designed this cup, but it was back when he made it, back in those days, like, you couldn't manufacture things very easily, and so it was kind of obvious there was something suspicious about this cup. But these days, what's really cool, and this is just mind-blowing, like this is only possible because of 3D printers, which is just crazy. This geometry is only possible to make with 3D printers, and it's essentially got the siphon in the tube and all of the things inside the cup. Like, you probably can't see it that perspective, and that's good because it's hidden. You can see a small hole at the bottom and a small hole at the top. There's a cool video by the Action Lab if you want to see it. But it's just really cool how this cup works. And then we can just make it. I also went to Thailand, and I had no clue. But apparently in Bangkok, the capital of Thailand, there were just lizards, like big lizards. Like, these aren't small lizards, by the way. These are like this big, like bigger than you can probably see in the frame. But they are really big lizards. And they're just roaming the city. I guess they're really only roaming the parks, right? The same way squirrels in the UK only exist in parks. Like the same way these things exist in parks. But it's just so cool. You have quite a lot of these things. Like big lizards just roaming around in front of you. On the road, on the path, on the grass, in the water, literally everywhere. Just sunbathing, just like whacking their trough up and down. Just like lizarding around. It's just really cool experience. I had no clue this was a thing. And this is literally the highlight of my entire Bangkok. My entire holiday in Christmas. It was seeing these lizards. It was so cool. You can see this really fat lizard in the bottom right, snoozing, because this was like peak heatness of the day. Very close to the end now. This was some cyber competition. I'm not going to talk too much about it, but the points that I said that I wanted to make here is, so I applied to this competition just because. So I was at the society's event at Imperial, and it was really poorly organized. And it was taking like an hour. So they started like an hour and 15 minutes after they actually were meant to start. And so I was just sitting there for literally an hour and 15 minutes doing nothing. And so I was almost just doom scrolling. So I had literally nothing to do. And I came across this random ad about this cybersecurity hacking competition. So it's like, I'm here for the next hour, I might as well sign up. So I signed up to it. And then on the day when the challenge came unlocked, the first round was an online round, and I didn't bother participating. But then my friend, who I didn't even know was participating, sent me a photo, like an out of context photo of him on a leaderboard, and he didn't even tell me this was his competition. But like, I just knew, because what else would it be? He's also a friend into hacking, and so he made a comment about that, and I was really, all of a sudden, I was super motivated to do it. So I spent like the next 10 hours just working on this competition, the CTF. I kind of did that on a whim, and I'm so happy I did that on a whim, because I signed up on a whim, I did this on a whim, and I ended up getting selected for the final round. So here was the final round, and it was such a cool experience. And again, I didn't even come into this with a winning attitude. I just kind of did it on a whim. Like, I'm here for the fun, I'm here for the chill, to meet people, to do cool stuff, learn things. And I ended up getting selected to the UK team, top 30, which is very, very, very cool. And my lesson here was just, I just did this all on a whim, right? And I somehow went this far. And in life, there are all these random opportunities that you get, and everything is just random. Like, everything's unpredictable. Just don't bother thinking about stuff. Just try to say yes to stuff. Try to do cool things, because they will eventually lead on to very valuable experiences and relationships like these. There was also a huge hackathon. IC Hack is Europe's largest student-run hackathon from a few weeks ago, and I was a volunteer, so this is me handing out cupcakes as people come in on the first day. And the reason I quite like this role is because last year when I went to this tech conference called State of OpenCon, I was like lost. A few hours into this, I was lost and I wanted to go somewhere. So I went to like the help desk and I was just like, where do I go? But like, as I approached the help desk, the volunteer there like stood up, super happy, super smiley. He was like, where do you want to go? I told her, and she was like, awesome, here's a map, this is where you can go, it's right over there, pointed. And like, she was so helpful and so kind, and like that literally made my day. That one interaction where I was feeling a bit lost, a bit iffy, like that just boosted me up and helped me make the most of the rest of the day. And I think that's what you realize as like a front end hospitality role, and like that's a huge impact. And so I was really happy that I jumped on this opportunity where I could come here and be the first point of contact that people see, and giving out cupcakes. Like this brought a smile to most people's faces. Like hundreds of people. I don't know, this might have been like a high point for hundreds of people in that day. They're probably the first high point they had. And like, I'm just really happy that I could kind of provide that to them. And I could offer this really cool experience and kind of just brighten up everyone's day. And it's a really bubbly character. Like if you walk into a really bubbly character offering you cupcakes, like you're gonna love that, right? And so that's why I tried to do, and I think I did a good job. And I'm really grateful for having that experience a year ago, kind of teaching me that lesson about hospitality. Finally, today, my birthday, this is my cake. It's this like multi-layered crepe cake, so you can kind of see the layers of crepe here. It's Earl's Grey tea flavored. I just thought that looked interesting. Like, that's literally the reason I chose it. It looked interesting, and it actually does taste nice, so thank God there. I quite like this cake. It's from a place in London called Cova. They have a few patisseries around, and I like it because of the texture. Like, as you eat it in your mouth, you can feel the texture of all of these layers of crepe and all these layers of the cream layers between the crepe. And as you cut into this cake with a spoon, you can feel the spoon cut into each layer as you like cut out a bite to put in your mouth. That sounds so weird saying it, but it's just true. Like, it's just such a cool textural experience, and that's why I love these crepe cakes. Yeah. Also, on another note, you can see they also have some flowers, some edible flowers on this cake, which made it look fancier. So, yes, edible flowers. I think that's the end of my slideshow. Yeah, that's the end. So, hopefully you enjoyed a couple of the stories there. Hopefully you learned some really random new things, and maybe have some insights to take away, because I think you can always learn stuff from other people. There's always stuff to learn from other people. And, this video, I kind of wanted to share some cool experiences that I've had that I think other people might benefit from, because it's no good just to be having these experiences and having this knowledge and this information. So I kind of want to share it with you, hopefully inspire you to do cool things, and learn some cool things. And if any way you can return the favor to us, like not even to us, just to the internet. Like, can you, or not even to the internet, just to your friends? Like, can you share cool stuff you've done? Can you give them cool insights? Can you tell them about opportunities? Like, just as you experience life, share it with other people, because everyone experiences different things. Everyone has different knowledge and different interests. Like, there is stuff that that I would literally never in my entire life think about. or maybe in 10 years I'll learn, which I wish I knew 10 years ago today. And that's just something that only like you can do. Like you as an individual, only you can do that to someone else. And I think that's kind of the benefit of this. And that's part of the reason we started the podcast, is to share these things. Not just in this video, but in general episodes where we talk about our opinions on tech and other random things. Just bring to light things that other people may not have thought of. Because, the internet's done a great job at helping us learn things that we never thought of. And it's just this whole knowledge sharing, experience sharing community on the internet and in the world as humans. And I think that's just cool. And so today, hopefully, contributed to that. Hopefully, we contribute to that every single week, Kyle and I. And hopefully, you enjoyed. And I guess we'll see you in the next episode.
The thought for this episode was, is the future of dating apps AI? Dating apps, like other applications and companies, are rushing to implement AI in their products. In particular, Grindr, which is a dating app aimed at LGBT people, has implemented a so-called wingman. This aims to achieve two things. Firstly, it aims to help you filter the people that you end up talking with. The idea is to save you time and stop the swiping, as it so goes. And it potentially talks with other people's AI for you to see if potentially you're a match. This is significant because roughly 350 million people in the world use some form of dating apps, with around 20% of people aged 25 to 34 in particular. So there's a lot of people who could potentially be dating via AI soon. So my first question to you, Sourish, is, would you use a dating app? And more importantly, would the addition of AI change that?
The concept of dating apps is very intriguing because, from a more objective scientific standpoint, it's clearly the smarter thing to use for every human to use a dating app, because you can kind of go through a larger range of choices that will ultimately lead to longer lasting success and happiness. However, as humans, most of us also have this ideal fantasy in our head that we kind of come across the right person through whatever activity we're doing. And obviously that is just less likely to achieve a better outcome. However, we feel like it's going to be the better outcome and we prefer it. So I'm very torn on whether to use dating apps or not. However, what I do think is that the integration of AI into dating apps is fantastic. Because especially this last point that you mentioned, that Grindr are getting AIs to talk to each other, like your wingman to talk to another person's wingman. I think that's great because one fantastic thing about large language models is their ability to talk and essentially mimic or clone someone else. And if you can digitally clone two people and get them to talk to each other first and kind of simulate a bunch of different situations for a couple hours before actually getting them to meet, then I feel like your rate of success is going to be way higher, and I'm quite excited to see how this how this turns out.
On dating apps, I feel that there's a recent trend that people on these dating apps are not entirely seeking long-term relationships, and therefore it becomes less and less good for a lot of people who try to seek long-term relationships, and therefore the reputation of dating apps become, less good. On AI, I do think that this is an excellent idea because, as you said, it solves, a big pain point, which is that you have to invest time to talk to people, to get to know them. But if an AI does that for you, that does seem to be exceptional. The problem, or one of the problems, is that you then need to train the AI about you, right? It needs to represent you in a good manner, in a manner which sells yourself as well as possible, but also is true to yourself. And so, because of the fact that I don't see this training being done locally on mobile phones, you then have to give these dating companies a whole load of your data, a whole load of your sensitive data. And I think that is potentially suboptimal if they do not manage it well. And I think the chances of them managing it well is not huge. I think that is potentially a big problem. Another big problem is that this will be very expensive in terms of compute, if I'm not mistaken, because in order for this to work, you essentially have to constantly have AIs talking to each other, and that will be very expensive. So I'm not sure if people will be willing to pay top dollar for AI to date on their behalf.
I disagree with both of your points, actually. So the first point about data, obviously I do think that's an issue, but will it have any effect in terms of user adoption? I think not, because typically you go to a dating app with intent and arguably a bit of desperation, and therefore you're going to be perfectly fine handing over, just a bit of your data to this company if it means you're going to get a huge return on investment. And this idea of ROI, I think, also plays into the fact that people are indeed going to be more willing to pay for a better service, because if these apps such as Grindr can show statistics about how the AI models actually help you, well, I don't see a reason why you wouldn't now pay 10 times as much, because if it helps find a really, really good partner for you way quicker, well, that's worth like thousands of dollars to most people. So why wouldn't you spend a bit of extra money to make that happen?
I think whilst you make objectively sound points, I think the first point, where people might be willing to give data up, and indeed they do already, I think that's true. But I think the second point is less true, because as soon as you want people to pay money for a service that, as you said, can have a good ROI, people are hesitant. And I think you can see this in a lot of situations where people are very reluctant to pay for digital services, period, even though it may be very good value. And so I'm not sure how many people will be willing to pay hundreds of dollars a year for this AI wingman. Maybe you will, Sourish, but I do hesitate the adoption.
But the dating app market is very well positioned in the sense that the whole thing is about emotion, right? Like, people come in with an emotional investment, and your whole goal is to foster emotions. And so people are much more emotionally vulnerable and open in the dating app space. And so I think you can much more successfully sell this idea of AI helping you reach your goals by, showing them some nice images that these people see themselves or hope themselves to be in a couple of years' time. And if you really create this optimal future for this person through your AI advertising, then I think these dating apps are very, very, very well positioned to actually make money off the AI boom.
I think we'll just have to see about what the future of AI dating apps may bring. To close, I think that this is sort of a problem where you need a lot of people having adopted this in order for it to be successful. And I think if people don't adopt this, this will ultimately fail, because if you only have a very select few people who are paying for this AI dating, it's not going to work very well, right? So you sort of need a critical mass of people. And I wonder if they will be able to get that, because I think that will be a big barrier in them finding success. Thank you for listening. We'll be back next Monday with a new episode.
And check out the description to sign up to our weekly newsletter. You can also reach out to us on X at the WaffleByte. See you there.